Hi friends, it is currently July 20th and I reached my Goodreads goal. I cannot believe it, honestly. My goal was 70 books this year and I finished it in like 6 months. So I thought that I would make a video about my favorites and my not so favorites. Out of 70 books, that's quite a bit. I think at the end of the year I'll do like an update and see if these are still my favorite and just see how many I end up reading by the end of the year. I'm pretty excited to challenge myself. I'm going to use this number from this year to make my goal for next year, so we will see what happens. But I want to start off with my disappointments. I will end with my top 10, but the books that I was honestly disappointed with, the first one is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, I believe. I'm totally going to butcher these author names, so I'm going to try my best, but if I'm pronouncing it wrong, I apologize in advance. But If We Were Villains is kind of like a dark, eerie vibe kind of book. It's about these group of friends that are actors and actresses and they're obsessed with Shakespeare. Like, they talk to each other in Shakespeare, they have a lot of the plays memorized. So this was super intriguing to me. I thought that it would be a good mystery, like, friend book about this like found family. And honestly, I was really disappointed. I won't say any spoilers, but it just did not live up to the hype that I had made for it. I had a friend that also wanted to read it, and we kind of talked about it a bit. I don't think she's read it yet, but I was pretty disappointed. It was not what I was expecting. I guessed the ending. Just things like that. I also am not a big fan of Shakespeare. I am not a fan of like Romeo and Juliet, any of his plays that I had to read over and over again for high school and college. The cons of being an English lit major, let me tell you. But anyway, so it was not my favorite. I was pretty disappointed. I was excited to read it. I liked the aesthetic of it. I liked everything that it seemed like it would be, and it wasn't that. So that was my first disappointment of this year. And it was the first book I read this year, so that also did not start off the year in a good spot. Honestly, my biggest disappointments were thrillers. I don't typically read thrillers, but I was kind of just feeling like reading anything and everything, which I still will. But I also read Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney. I read His and Hers by her, and then I read Sometimes I Lie. I loved His and Hers. I thought that was so well done. I did not guess the ending for that one. I really liked the different perspectives, the different narration. I liked that one a lot. So then I read Sometimes I Lie, and that one was very disappointing. It just did not live up to what I wanted it to be. The whole premise of it was very intriguing to me. It's about a woman in a coma, and she's trying to remember what happened to her and why she's in the coma. And I just thought the book was so dark for no reason. I mean, that's kind of what you get with thrillers a lot of times, I feel like, is they can get pretty dark, and this one just had moments that were just not my favorite. So I was pretty disappointed in this one. I did read the whole thing. I needed to know the ending. I liked the ending, I think, kind of. The other thing about Alice Feeney is that I think her books are a little confusing. Like, the end of Sometimes I Lie and the end of His and Hers kind of leave like an open end, which there's nothing wrong with that, but part of me when I finished both of them was like, what just happened? Like, what is this ending? And I especially felt that way with Sometimes I Lie. So across the board, another disappointment, not my favorite. And then the last one was Don't Look for Me by Wendy Walker. And that one, so the premise is this mom, I think she has a son and a daughter, and this mom disappears, and the whole premise setup is that she has been wanting to disappear. So when she disappears, a lot of people just say she wanted to leave her family, she didn't want to be here anymore, but her daughter doesn't think that's true, so her daughter continues to investigate, and it's told from the perspective of the mom and the daughter. So I liked it for the most part, but then the ending I thought was really dumb. I was so disappointed. And that one was on my list for a long time, so I was also really hopeful that it would be good. I had heard good things, I'd seen good reviews, and I was majorly disappointed, so not my favorite. But now we will get into my top 10. So number 10 is Chain of Thorns by Cassandra Clare. It is the last one in the Last Hours trilogy. I am not a love triangle type of person, and when a love triangle is being set up, when it is happening, I'm not for it. It is not my favorite. Sometimes I think it is done well, but for the most part, it's not my favorite. So this book, like, I finished this series because I was so intrigued by the way that Cassandra Clare was setting up the love triangle, and like her endings just make you want to keep reading. So I was so happy with the last book because everything gets tied up and things go well, and obviously it's Cassandra Clare, so there are some heartbreaking moments as well as the good moments. But overall, it was just nice to have like a good ending. It was nice to be with those characters again, and it just made me feel so much relief when I finished that book because I was so stressed. I was stressing. So I'm very glad that it ended well. So my 9th is one that is probably not talked about overly. I borrowed it from my dad, and it's called Grief's Country by Gail Griffin, and it's a memoir of her story after losing her husband. So it kind of sets up like her romance with her husband while they were dating and then after he died. And that book, her writing is beautiful. She's brutally honest. I felt like I could understand a lot of my friends who are grieving or who have gone through just a terrible event in their lives, and they're just different based on what happened. And so this book gave me perspective, which a lot of times is what books do. They just give us perspective on stories that are not ours. So I really loved this one. I loved Gail's writing. I was invested the whole time. I wanted to keep reading it. I finished it on the car ride back from vacation, and I finished it probably within like 2 hours. I loved it. It was so good. Number 8 is Let There Be Art by Rachel Marie Kong. Her last name is spelled K-A-N-G, but I know for a fact that it is Kong because we had her on our podcast. So you'll have to listen for that when it comes out. But she wrote the book Let There Be Art, and what I loved about it is she talks about how creative God is and how he is the ultimate creator. He is the beginning of creation. He's the reason we are here. And she talks about the different forms of art and just how healing and important it is to draw, to sing, to write, to all these things, even things that we don't think of as art, or maybe people don't think they're creative, but really everything we do is creative. We are creative people. Even if you're crunching numbers or gardening or anything you could think of is creative. And I just loved the perspective that she brought, and I also loved that she shared other people's writing. So there were poems by other people, there were little snippets of writing by other people, and I just really loved that. I'm a huge poetry fan, so it was cool to read a nonfiction book that also included poetry and just Rachel's perspective on art. I loved it. I was really surprised by it, and it was really good. Number 7 is an older book that I borrowed from a friend, and it's called Looking for Cassandra Jane by Melody Carlson. So if you ever read the Diary of a Teenage Girl series, it's the same author, but just years later, a different series that she wrote. At least I think it's a couple years later. I don't actually know. Don't quote me on that. But it is about a girl that accidentally joins a cult, and I don't know about you guys, but that is so intriguing to me. I mean, cults just in general are just mind-blowing to me because I'm like, how could someone get into a cult? But reading this book, it is a work of fiction, but reading this book just adds so much perspective about how things can start just from something simple like a Bible study and snowball into a full-on cult. This book stressed me out. I read it in one sitting. I couldn't put it down. It was so good. It was so sad. It was so good. So yeah, so that was my number 7. I read it in like I said, one sitting. It was so good. And yeah, I just really liked that one. I think it's a little before its time with talking about like counseling and mental health. So I really appreciated that in a Christian fiction book, especially from its time. So loved that one. And then number 6. So these books were cutesy, like little romance books. There's 4 of them. Actually, there might be 5 of them in the series, but it's called the Eden Falls Academy series by Judy Corey, and they're like high school romances. These like rich kids, basically these rich but very humble kids, go to Eden Falls Academy, and it's like their individual love stories within their friend group. So it starts off like the first one is about these 2 twins that move to the school. And then the first one of them falls in love with a basketball player, at least I think, or like some kind of sporty dude. I think it's basketball, but I could be wrong. It's been a while since I've read them. But then like the other ones are about like a guy loses his mom and he's grieving, and then there's a girl in a cult and she can't be with the guy she loves because she's in a cult and she doesn't realize it. I just loved these books. I flew through the series. I did not read, I think she has a new one coming out, so that might be the 5th one. I know I read 4 of them, and I just liked them. They were just like cutesy little romance books. And number 5 is another memoir and nonfiction book by Tori Hope Peterson, and it is about her story of growing up in foster care and just her journey to who she is now, and I loved it. It was another one that I just was so invested in. I love reading people's stories and just learning about where different people come from, the different things that happen to different people. I mean, life is just crazy in the way that it can impact people, and her story is filled with so many ups and downs and heartbreaking moments, and I just think it's a book everyone should read. I've been really learning a lot about the foster care system and people who are doing a lot to help kids in foster care who are making a change in the system, and this was one where I learned so much. I'm very thankful that I read it. I think everyone should read it, and it just gives you a lot of insight into the foster care system and the brokenness of our world and families and just things that happen that are out of these little kids' control. And I really loved it. I really love the work that Tori does, so I was really excited to read her book. And if you want to check it out, I would recommend, it's called Fostered by Tori Hope Peterson, and it's beautiful. I love it, so I would recommend that one. So my 4th favorite of this year was Brave Enough to Be Broken by Toni Collier, and I just loved this book so much. I love Toni. I love her ministry. If you're familiar with her, she's kind of becoming a bigger name, is a big name, I don't really know, but this was a book that I needed right now. As you can see, there's a lot of highlights in this one, and I just feel like I am in a space where I'm acknowledging how broken I am and needing to be someone that shows up and is honest about I'm not okay. Like, everything is not okay. And so this one was just really healing for me to read. This meant a lot to me. Toni's story is so important. There's just so much brokenness in our lives, and until we recognize it, it can do a lot of damage. And so I'm just very thankful for reading this one. I really liked it. The cover is super cute, and I'm excited to read more by Toni because I have a feeling we will have more books by her pretty soon. So I'm excited to keep reading her books, and the work that she does is incredible. My number 3, so this is my top 3 now. My 3rd book of the year, 3rd favorite. This one I started reading on Kindle Unlimited, so I was reading it on my iPad. I don't have a Kindle, I have an iPad. Sorry guys, I'm not part of the Kindle community, but it's so close. It's the same thing. Anyway, so I started reading this on my iPad and fell in love with it. Loved it so much. I was probably like 20 to 30% in on my iPad, and I knew I needed to order this book. This was like a while ago. I think this was in like, I think it was in the winter. It was either like the end of fall or the winter, so it was also like the perfect, oh, actually I know it was in December. I read this one in December because I remember reading it with like the Christmas lights strung up. Anyway, it is called The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and I just think this book is beautiful. It is everything that I love in a novel. It starts out with her as this girl living in France, and then she's in New York City, and if you don't know me, then you don't know that I want to go to Paris so bad, go to France so bad, and it was actually my dream to live in New York City way back when. I am now a Grand Rapids girl, but it was my dream to live in New York City, so anything that is set in New York City is just like top tier for me. So I loved this book. I thought the writing was beautiful. I want to read it again and annotate it and highlight it because I just know there were so many quotes in here that I was obsessed with. I was not expecting the love story that came in this one, and I love this book. Also, the cover, like, are you kidding me? It is so beautiful. I also have seen the blue one, and I love that one just as much. So that was the hardest part of buying this book, was which cover do I get, which is so silly. But I settled for the original, the black and gold, and I love it. If you haven't seen the movie The Age of Adeline, it really reminded me of that. I honestly had to do some research to see if they were like the same thing. But The Age of Adeline is one of my favorite movies, and so this book is just like the movie in book form. So if you love that movie and haven't read this yet, I would recommend. So good, so good. This was my third favorite of the year. I just loved it. My second one, which I did talk about in a video when I was home alone and I was just reading, but my second favorite book of the year was A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman. Bachman, I'm not sure how you say that. Fredrik Backman or Fredrik Backman, I don't know. But I was so surprised at how much I loved that book. It was also another one that I borrowed from a friend, and I just loved the community aspect of it, the healing, just the whole story was so beautiful to me. I cried so much reading that book, and Ove I feel like Fredrik always makes his characters so complex and there's so much to them. Like, you begin at the surface level with these people or this plot or something that's going on, and it's mundane things other than anxious people, but his other books are just like mundane people. Like, Ove is just an old man that's obsessed with making his neighborhood like perfect. And then you dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's like, Ove is sentimental, he has a big heart, he loves people, he's just rejecting them, he's hurting, he's grieving, like, it was so good. It was so good. I'm always obsessed and surprised by how Fredrik Backman writes. I thought the same thing with Anxious People when I read it. It was like the beginning, and then you dive deep into all these people's stories and everything that's going on, and I just love it because I think it's true. Like, people, you just meet them and you see the surface level, but if you get to know them, there is so much to people, and I feel like he captures that so beautifully. I definitely want to read more by him. But A Man Called Ove really surprised me, broke my heart, made me cry, made me all sappy and sentimental. Love it, love it, love it, love it with my whole heart. Okay, and now my favorite book of the year, which, starting to talk about A Man Called Ove and then talking about this one, I'm gonna be way too excited. I'm just gonna warn you right now. This book was also one that I read. I read it on my iPad, could not put it down, so I read it like in one day. I remember Ty and I went on a date and I was like reading it on my phone because I just couldn't stop reading. And not when we actually ate, it was just when we were waiting for our table, so don't think I'm neglecting my husband. But I did read it while we were waiting for our table. I love this book so much. It is one of my top 10 like favorites ever in the world, I think. Probably a current like number one, I don't know for sure, but my number one book for this year was Again But Better by Christine Riccio. I'm so sorry, I do not know how to say her last name. She's also a YouTuber, and she actually like vlogged or made videos of her writing process, which I think is super cool, so I'll have to check those out. But she's also been a big bookstagrammer, like back before bookstagramming was a whole big thing it is now. And anyway, Again But Better. Okay, so this book was also on my TBR for the longest time. I did not read it, I had never found it, but I was obsessed with the cover. I thought it was so cute, and the synopsis is this girl's in college and she feels like she needs to change her whole life. She's studying abroad and she's been the shy, introverted, awkward girl. She doesn't have any friends, she doesn't have any good memories, so she's studying abroad in London, and she tells herself she needs to make a change, she needs to make friends, she needs to go all out, and she does. And she meets this amazing group of people. They're studying abroad, she's having so many adventures in London, and she falls in love. And I will not get into that, but this book just perfectly captured like the will they, won't they, the hardship of having a crush on someone, of being friends with someone you like, of just knowing that things don't last forever, like knowing that you're only in college for a season, you're only in school for a season, things change, you leave your people. In this instance, she's only in London for a couple months, and she has a lot of expectations on her life. Her parents want her to be a doctor, she wants to be a writer, so there's also that element of it. This book was just exactly what I needed right now. It brought me back into being in college, falling in love, like all of those sentimental feelings that are still fresh but over for me. So I loved this book. I don't think I could have read it at a more perfect time, but I would recommend to anyone and everyone. I'm also excited to see the author's writing process, and I know that she has another book out that I would love to read. Like literally anything by her is going to be an instant buy from me. I'm gonna want it. So this one was my all-time favorite, would recommend, and I did buy a copy with a bonus scene, which I already read because it was also on the edition on my iPad, but the bonus scene just makes it so much better. So if you do buy this book, buy it with the bonus scene. And I also got this one from Pango, like way back when, so I know there's more out there if you want to get yourself a copy. Thank you guys so much for watching my crazy excited energy, overly explaining my personal love with these books. I just love reading. I am so thankful to be talking about this stuff. I can't believe I made my reading challenge. I've read 70 books so far this year. Crazy, but thank you guys so much for watching. I love you. I hope you're enjoying what you're reading, and I'll see you soon. Bye!